Overreaction is a part of college sports and media, but I think we've gone a little bit far with the death of the SEC talk. Part of what goes on in my business is getting reaction from people, and the more reaction you get, the more money you make. Just like that's what it is. And this discussion of the death of the SEC, 2 years into the SEC not winning a national championship, which for the record, I do think is the longest stretch since 2014 and 13, which is, 10 years ago. The notion that the SEC is dying or dead, y'all, please stop this. Please stop this. Now, I went back and I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson here, okay? And I'm going to talk about this for a while. If you're certain that the Big Ten is past the SEC, which it probably did this year, but if you're certain that the Big Ten has passed the SEC, my suggestion to you would be to make sure that you've got your data correct. Let's go back to 1990, and you can go back before that too if you want to. But since 1990, these are the national championships by conference, and I had to combine some of the schools, some of the conferences because people have changed. The Pac-12 has won 2 national championships since 1990, okay? Of course, SC gave those away, but I'm not going to get into all that. The Pac-12 has won 2 national championships. Then the Big Ten with 3.5. The Southwestern Conference, Big 8, Big 12 has won 5. The ACC has won 5.5, including Georgia Tech. I'm being gracious. And then the SEC has won 16.5. So basically, every other year since 1990, the SEC has won a national championship. The Big Ten has won a national championship or shared it amongst 2 institutions in their conference. That's it, Michigan and Ohio State. The 2 schools that should really be good and have not been great, in terms of winning national championships. They've not been really good. I mean, let's just be what it is. The SEC since 1990, I've not gone back and added all of these up, but we knew Alabama, right? Florida, Tennessee, LSU, Auburn, Georgia. 6 schools in the league have won a national championship. That's triple, if you're doing your math, what the Big Ten has won. And no, I'm not counting USC in the Big Ten. I'm not counting Texas in the SEC or Oklahoma. I'm giving them to over there. If you want to divvy it up, it doesn't make it a lot or better or worse. But this notion, this talking point is getting a little out of control. Just like, first of all, Ohio State should certainly win national championships, period. Okay? That's just all there is to it. Ohio State's the best team in the country this year. I don't know that they've won the national championship yet. You could be watching this in the summer. I don't know. But my suspicion is that Ohio State will win a national championship. Ohio State should win national championships, period. That does not mean that Wisconsin, Penn State, Nebraska, and USC are any closer to winning national championships. Okay? That just means Ohio State, which is, at worst, the 3rd most visible program. It's got probably more fans than anybody. Look, Ohio State should be winning national championships. When they don't, you saw what happened to Ryan Day. I'm recording this a week before the national championship game. If Notre Dame wins it over Ohio State, honestly, there should be a lot of shame in Ohio about that deal. It just should be. They're not the same team. They're not close. But anyway, There's a lot of spike in the football right now. Michigan beat Alabama by a 1 play last year. Like, Georgia beat Ohio State by 1 play in 2022. They beat Texas Christian by 60-something points. But you get what I'm trying to say here is the overreaction. We are great at that, but it doesn't mean it's based in reality. Let me put it to you this way: Georgia, okay, Texas, Alabama. Those 3, I would say, are what most people think about right now when you think about the SEC. I think when you think about the Big Ten, you definitely think about Ohio State. You think about Michigan. I would say Penn State, although Michigan's won a national championship lately, Penn State's probably been more consistent in the last 10 years because Michigan's really had a rough up and down. This season was not a great season at Michigan, but they beat Ohio State. And they beat Alabama, too, by the way. But this assumes, like, who's coming out of nowhere in the Big Ten? Oregon? I would think Oregon, for me, is the second best team in the Big Ten. This assumes that LSU won't get their act together. LSU has won a national championship with every coach that they've hired this century. Will they win it with Brian Kelly? I don't know. I mean, I would think they would, but I'm not as certain as I used to be. I always thought Ryan Day would win a national championship at Ohio State. Do I think Kellen DeBoer will at Alabama? I mean, I don't know now. I'm not as certain about that part. Do I think Kirby Smart will win at least one more at Georgia? I do. But we have gotten to the point where we are so reactionary. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that Trevor Lawrence was never going to win, never going to lose a game after his freshman season at Clemson. I'm old enough to remember, this discussion that Georgia would win, 30 games in a row going into 2023. They won, 27 in a row or whatever it was. They didn't win 30. So we get so over the top with this stuff. We don't know what's going to happen at Texas. We don't know, like with Sarkisian, we don't know what's going to happen at USC. We don't know what's going to happen at Michigan or Indiana or all these places. I mean, my suspicion is if Penn State doesn't change its head coach, which it won't, then Penn State won't substantially change. If Ryan Day leaves Ohio State, I don't know that changes Ohio State. I mean, they could go hire Marcus Freeman tomorrow and roll on out. I mean, Ohio State's always going to be good, period. They're just what it is. So, that the SEC is not going to win the national championship 2 seasons in a row is not new news. The other thing I think that is being forgotten here in all of this is we're going to see 2 teams from, not the South win national championships with teams that were not generational teams. What we saw from 2018, but certainly 2019 to 2022 were generational teams. The 2019 LSU offense was crazy. It was followed up by the 2020 Alabama offense, which was, I'm not going to say it's better than the LSU 2019, but you could make the argument that it was because the quarterbacks were not, but I'm not going to get bogged down in that. 21 Georgia defense was generational, and then quite frankly, the 2022 Georgia team was probably as close to generational on both sides of the ball. They just killed everybody except Ohio State and Missouri. Okay, and the kind of moron class that has always been anti-SEC for whatever reason. They're getting their punches in right now, and that's fine. I mean, the league is down this year to me. Georgia's not what they were in 23, certainly not what they were in 22. Alabama is not at all what they were. Texas just came into the league. Texas had the same exact season they did last year. They just didn't win the SEC. Okay, they lost in the semifinals, a game they could have won. I don't know. I don't know that they should have won it. They could have won it against Ohio State, but they shouldn't have won it, looking back on it to me. And then, the SEC just down this season, comparatively speaking, to in the past. I mean, you look at, everybody was talking about how hot South Carolina was, and they're like, I mean, all right. And then they get beat by Illinois. I don't think the bowl games in particular are something you need to be fretting over so much. I mean, I've never felt that way about it. It's just not, it's like if you were to go into the NCAA tournament and, you have a really good season as a league and it's pretty obvious. Like if the SEC in this year's NCAAs like flops out, it's hard to deny what they did during the season. They're in the preseason and beating everybody's brains in. If the time people pay attention are going to be in these tournaments. So, that Georgia lost to Notre Dame, that was not a good look. Tennessee getting destroyed. Texas losing eventually to Ohio State and struggling against Arizona State. Everybody's trying to get their lumps in right now, but all I would say is I would not be so. This season, the SEC was down. It was still the best league, and you can put your hate comments down below if you want. But Penn State getting to the semifinal with the path that they had, really, like you're going to act like that's the same as what Notre Dame even went through, because it's not. It's certainly not the same as what Ohio State went through. So Penn State was somewhat gifted a spot in the semifinals. Texas, to some degree, I would make the same argument, but I think Texas's path was more challenging than Penn State's. Put it to you that way. I mean, SMU sucked. I mean, they just were not a good team. They were the second best team in the ACC, and as it turns out, that was not worth shit. And we knew, but those of us who live down here knew that a long time ago, so that's not really anything. But the Clemson example is a good one. Clemson chose to be really good. They weren't elevating their league. I mean, Ohio State winning the national championship, which I am presuming, that might not happen, which I am presuming, that does not necessarily elevate the rest of the league. Again, this century, just going backwards real quick, Michigan has won a national championship. Ohio State, that's it in that league. That's it. That's not much. And if you want to say, oh, well, include SC. Okay, well, I'll include SC. Michigan, Ohio State, SC, that's it. If I'm doing that, then I'm going to include Oklahoma, LSU, Texas, Florida, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia. Did I say LSU earlier? That's 7 this century that are in the SEC currently. So everybody's paying their players now. Well, yeah. I mean, the SEC's been cheating forever. Maybe, you cannot have this discussion without the arrogance of the on the academic side of the Big Ten, which is quite obviously a better academic conference up and down. Like, no one's comparing Indiana to Ole Miss. Like, those are not comparable. So, you always get that, and then they kind of, well, look, it's just playing football, man, and that's it. And Notre Dame with all of their academic stuff, just play football. No one wants to hear that, that half-ass shit anyway. It's just such a ridiculous comment, particularly when you're talking about Georgia, Florida, A&M, Texas. These are elite institutions. Whether y'all want to admit it or not, I don't know. But they are. I'm not even going to discuss Vanderbilt. But we've gotten to the point where, because something happened in media, we have to react and think that is the only thing that will ever happen moving forward. And when the Big Ten strings together national championships from 4 different programs in 4 consecutive years, like this league did from 7 until 11, or 7 to 10, or like this league did 3 different programs in 3 different years, like it did from 2019 to 21. Yeah, then, that the SEC has taken a step back should mean the Big Ten moves forward. What's happened, though, is that the team that, that should be winning in the Big Ten is winning. Like, isn't this as much about the failure of the Big Ten over the last 25 years as it is, the SEC's dominance? I mean, you've seen, what Georgia did to Michigan in the Orange Bowl was, they just brutalized them. What Alabama did to Ohio State in the national championship game in 2020 was embarrassing, just to be honest. I can't remember who LSU, they beat Clemson. Clemson beat Ohio State. I think that was on the last play of the game. The year before that, they absolutely demolished Ohio State. There's just been way too many examples of Southern schools, but the SEC schools in particular, what LSU did to Ohio State in 2000, or was it Florida, or was it Ohio State as well? I can't remember who Ohio State beat the brakes off of in 2007. That was Oklahoma, I think. This league took a step back this year, but that does not mean that it will take a step back moving forward. That's where I would be a little bit hesitant about all of these pronouncements. When you look at the futures from our buddies over at MGM, the futures are, a lot more split than they once were, because you're adding Texas, you're adding Oregon. But like, if I'm betting who's winning it next year, my suspicion is it's going to be Ohio State or one of the SEC schools. Ohio State doesn't like rep for Nebraska. Like Nebraska is not. I would be shocked, to be honest with you, if Nebraska won a national championship in the next 5 years. I just don't buy that. But but they have such great fans or whatever. Like so does South Carolina. Get in line. I'd be shocked if South Carolina won in the next 5 years. So we just have gotten a little bit out of control with this, the SEC is dead thing. But hey, I mean, they're not going to win it. And, the Big Ten wasn't dead. Ohio State is never going to die, period. I mean, I've talked about them being the best team for, I don't know, a couple of months now. So that they win the national championship is what should happen, to be honest. And again, I don't know that they will. But it'd be an embarrassment for everybody if Notre Dame won it. Let's just call it what it is. It'd be an embarrassment for the Big Ten. It'd be an embarrassment for the SEC. It'd be an embarrassment for the ACC because they can't really claim them. It'd be bad for everybody. I mean, for not doing anything for such a long time and having, a national championship appearance in 12 and getting destroyed by Alabama, and there's also this thing of the league is just Alabama. I mean, what? No, that's not what it is. That's a complete misunderstanding of the SEC, and it's what people who are pretty ignorant say. So I'm not surprised I see it out there. But I did want to just correct the record about the last 30. It's actually the last 35 years. Okay, so it's not quite every other year, unless you include Texas and Oklahoma. And I did not do that. I gave the Big 12, the Southwest Conference, the Big 12, Big 8. Their due. I mean, that's the last time Nebraska played for or won a national championship was way back then when they were in the Big 12 or when they were Southwest Conference. They should not have played for it when they played Miami, and they were in the Big 12 at that time. But the bulk of their success, Nebraska, was in the Big 8. Anyway, rant over. Back to the foolishness of the day.